blind. He's fallen into the water as punishment for all his sins.
And then the wheelchair is rotted. There are catfish that are suffering for a long time. And it appears to be that he sees a miracle, and they all are saved. Now, the saint thinks that such skepticism is alarming.
I think the boy thinks that the catfish jumped into the wheelchair to keep warm.
So the saint says, why are the fishes and loaves standing together?
He would have made loaves and fishes, but neither he nor the boy.
Oh, go get some transportation.
Where?
Now what? Start from the beginning.
Okay, it's an interior kitchen and window. Soup is boiling on the stove.
Okay.
A woman looks anxiously out the window at a violent storm, and the soup boils over.
How's that?
Well, it's kind of fake.
Ah, the soup.
So what?
Gotta do something with it.
I guess.
What comes next?
The
continues.
storm, I guess.
Well, that's storm. Okay, this is the bit about the thicket.
Oh, I'm gonna need that carpet.
I'll read it while you stop. Okay. Search continues. Storm blows up. Ready? Arms and shoulders tangle with dense underbrush and force their way through. A man in rain-drenched parka is searching urgently. A faint quacking quack quack is heard over the angry wind and crackling thunder. Bushes part and reveal the source of the quacks. A duck, alone ensnared in the briars, exhausted and near death. The duck exhales one last pitiful whine and faints. The man frees the duck from the briars and tucks him into his parka. No, that's kind of repetitious. Search continues, storm blows up, feet in heavy boots struggle in deep mud, arms and shoulders tangle with dense underbrush. I lost my place. Feet in heavy boots struggle in deep mud, arms and shoulders tangle with dense underbrush. No, don't use your mouth or something. Yeah, that's it. A man in rain-drenched park is searching urgently. A faint quacking is heard over the angry wind and... Wait. Okay. Let's go on. Bushes part and reveal the source of the quacks. A duck, alone ensnared in the briars, exhausted and near death. The duck exhales one last pitiful whine and faints. The man frees the duck from the briars and tucks him into his parka against the weather. Oh, the duck. A duck.
A duck.
Alone, ensnared in the briars.
I gotta get the duck on.
Okay, I'll read that part again. A duck, alone, ensnared in the briars, exhausted and near death. The duck exhales one last pitiful whine and faints. The man frees the duck from the briars and tucks him into his parka against the weather. The man enters with the duck.
Mm.
The woman undertakes to revive the duck. She finds a basket.
That part about when you put the basket on the table, I think you better pick the basket.
Lauren, just be quiet. You're breaking my concentration. The man enters with the duck. The woman undertakes to revive the duck. Would you start reading, please?
The woman undertakes to revive the duck.
Just wrote that.
Entering again, and the man entering with the duck again.
Okay, but
And putting
just
it
one
in the
thing.
basket in the soup.
Remember to read the part that I'm doing.
Okay.
Because I have to try to concentrate on the duck.
Well, you're making such a big deal out of this, you know?
Oh, it's serious.
I know, see, that's the part I was talking to you about. She brings the duck hot soup. The man has to find his own supper. No, I don't see any supper.
Yeah, but just change your focus or something. You know, like you're looking for it.
I'm looking for my supper while I'm being the duck.
Well, I can't. I
All
didn't
right.
write the script.
Okay. The duck appears to be better.
I think the duck will be just fine in the
I do
morning.
too. I think the duck will be just great. This is realism.
One can have a realistic anything with a big white duck.
There's a Michelangelo in here somewhere that has a big white duck in it, a bird. It's a big white fowl, and it sits in the picture just like this.
During the night, the duck discards his blankets and enters the bed between the woman and her husband.
The duck begins to caress the woman, and she responds in her sleep. Woman's face in sexual ecstasy.
Which was the ducks? Which were the ducks?
Yeah. Some years later, a boy reaches the age of doubt and begins to ask questions. My father was a duck rancher, always following the ducks around.
Boy, go see if your father and the ducks are hungry. Your father and the ducks will be home soon.
Are we going to the circus?
That depends on what your father and the ducks are doing.
And when I was a boy, I was never quite sure. Let's do that again.
Yeah.
And when I was a boy.
Boy, wait.
Let's try that again. And when I was a boy, I was never quite sure. Oh, Sally.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sure. It's never a boy, so it's kind of stupid for me to say that. Okay.
Ready? And when I was a boy. This could take all night.
Okay, I'm ready.
And when I was.
Oh, now you're laughing.
Okay.
Okay.
And when I was a boy, I was never quite sure which was the ducks and which was my old man. Your father always sits at the head of the table and also is the one without the feathers. Look across table reveals duck. So I looked to the head of the table and saw a white bird saying grace. But Mom, Father has feathers. Why, so he does. Wait a minute. That's not your father. And we rushed outside, and there was one in the yard that hadn't a feather anyplace. George, come out of there and eat your supper. Go back in the house, you silly woman. I've been living in this duckyard for 15 years. Oh, you have you? Well, then who's the father of the boy, then? Quack.
The revelation of his parentage shocked the boy, and he became overly sensitive, and then confused. But when the boy's father, that is, legal father, human guardian, began giving him money over a period of time, the accumulated surplus coalesced into a clear message. Go south. Buy a bus ticket south. Where is this? I can't help you, honey, if you don't know where you want to go. Where is this? I can't help you, honey, if you don't know where you want to go.
Buy a car and go north. Go down to the interstate and see the life in the great gray river that man has produced. Reflect upon the origin of that life. Note that the Fords and Chevys are more rare now, that the noble Pontiac no longer represents a solid income and is hardly distinguishable from a Buick, and that the supreme Chrysler, once daring and wild, has fallen into the hands of its enemies and flaunts its shame. Much life is foreign and strange. Where once the great American behemoth was master, chrome-armored and proud, now rules the low Toyota and its pitiful domestic coupe. We are poor. Flee this strangeness while you can and return home to Detroit, from which the American spirit did once flow and to which it must inexorably return.
Once more I find that I wish again to see my old home back in Michigan. When on winter nights, yeah, we'd cavort with our butts frozen stiff in our shawls. I reminisce often of fishing in the water at the shores of Lake Michigan. But the fish and I, we parted ways. The fish are dead and I live in L.A. When the global economy is well again, and the Fords and Chevys will sell once again, and the foreigners driven back to the sea, Michigan once again will be free. Then Jesus will drive into motor town in the back of a caddy with a rag top down. He'll sit at crisis, oh, here's a thing of the past. I've gone to town, like Michigan is a gas. And it's loving all will be born again and rise from our tomb in Michigan. Our sons of the Wolverine, our sons so true. Michigan, coming home to you. Michigan, coming home to you. Michigan, coming home to you.
You got a driver's license? I don't need a driver's license. I've got money. I'm going to buy this car. If you don't have a driver's license, you can't buy a car. I'm going to buy this car.
By the state of his clothing, the man in the swamp appeared to have fallen on hard times, but the boy had grown up in relative isolation and had not yet learned to fear the poor. The boy wanted him to come out of the water before he caught cold or drowned. The saint told him to get away, that he was blind and had fallen into the swamp as punishment for his sins. The boy had known suffering of his own and was not put off by the afflicted man's sharp tone of voice. He asked the saint's forgiveness and without sarcasm told him he should stay in the swamp if that's what he wanted to do. The saint changed his mind and told the boy to help him up. The boy's kindness did not soften the saint's disposition. When the wheelchair was righted, there were catfish in the chair with the saint. He said that he had been suffering for a long time and was about due for a miracle. Where there were no catfish, now there are two, he said. This is a miracle. The boy thought the catfish had gotten into the chair trying to keep warm. The saint thought that such skepticism was alarming in such a young man and vowed to produce a genuine miracle. He would have made loaves and fishes, but neither he nor the boy could come up with a loaf for starter. He didn't have a loaf, so he discarded the fishes. So the saint said, "Why are you standing there? Pull me out." Then after a while he said, "We're not getting anywhere. Go get some transportation." The boy said, "Where?" "Over there," the saint said, and pointed across the swamp. The boy noted that the saint was not blind. The boy noted that the saint was not blind. The saint objected that he didn't say that he was. "Yes, you did. That was then. If I wasn't blind, why else would I have fallen over in the swamp?" That settled the issue, and the conversation drifted back to the miracle. The saint apologized in his fashion for not accomplishing the promised wonder and offered to make up the failure with knowledge. "I know some things about catfish," he said. "Did you know catfish are immortal? They don't die unless something kills them. They don't die of old age or disease. If nobody eats them, they keep living and growing. There's catfish the size of mountains that just lie on the bottom of the ocean. They're too big to move, but when they open their mouths, it pulls in all they need to eat. It sounds like a tide rushing in and out. I'm blind, so I can hear that well. I can hear the decaying of old ship's timber in that deep ocean, and the sharks go by and say, 'This wood is good kindling. If the climate wasn't so damp, we could build a fire and fry up a bunch of these catfish.' I can hear the whispering of rats' feet in the dust of old tombs. They eat the crumbling flesh of saints. I hear them smacking their white gums together and saying, "Pass the relish. This piece has gotten a bit dry." Most of the time I hear too much. I hear your father was a duck. The boy was startled. You can tell. I can hear halfway around the world. I can hear the dark side of you. There's something in all of you. There are others? Of course. All of you have something of a yen for the marshes about your eyes, and you're pointed south this time of year. I'm going to Detroit as soon as I get a driver's license. The duck is your nature. I don't believe in nature. Nature is slimy and ridiculous. I think we ought to get nature before it gets us. We need more artificial food so we know what we're eating, and artificial places so we know what's going to happen. We need to deal with what's really here. I don't believe in invisible worlds. The saint held contradictory opinions. He said that, 1, since you probably believe that the world doesn't go away when you close your eyes, you think probably that there is something underneath what you see that continues unseen. Consequently, you believe that all worlds are invisible. And also, 2, your longing for clarity is understandable but misguided, as if the only pure motives were outside of nature and embodied in lost causes, unrequited love, and homelessness. We are all of one mother, but we have diverse fathers. For instance, you say your father was a duck, but whose isn't sometimes? Somebody else thinks his was a fool, or a saint, or just a plain banker, or insurance salesman, and nobody wants to be stuck with that. You don't want to have a nature so that you can be free to think up your own style. Nature drives us to pointless activities. We acquire things, surround ourselves with other people, eat, love, procreate, do things in general that we would not do if we thought about it clearly and could help it. But we have to think that all of this seemingly destructive activity, if seen in the abstract, would add up to one great coherent nature. The problem, of course, is that nobody has ever seen it all in the abstract, but we get glimpses of it. As when someone thinks all the beer will be gone before he gets to the party, but it turns out that everyone else is late too. Call it providence or timing, but in those moments of organic unity, we see that our lives are not meaningless. You are not alone in your fear of the duck and the contempt you have for the hold he has on your past. There are many others. The division between the two natures has never been that clear. I know many ducks who have passed for men, and many humans who would be taken for ducks if they strayed too near the water. There are some who don't know which they are. You are lucky to know both. Those who try to hide from the duck turn the mild-mannered domestic fowl into a hungry animal. He pursues them relentlessly. In the early morning, ducks or geese had gathered in a valley awaiting the messenger from the human race. He was to speak at his appointed place on the cliff overhead. At noon, he had not yet come. During a lull in the general noise of the crowd, a thin, mostly inaudible voice could be heard speaking from the cliff on the opposite side of the valley. One by one, and then in larger groups, the ducks began to move toward the voice. Some grumbled as they went along, complaining of the shoddy arrangements and bad acoustics, but they pushed ahead anyway, and were just as anxious as the others to get a place where they could hear what was being said. Down the center of the valley was a shallow river with only one narrow bridge. The ducks, of course, could easily swim the slow river, but they wanted to look civilized to the human messenger. Consequently, they all crowded to the bridge and took nearly 5 hours to approach earshot of the far cliff. As they came together, this speaker concluded, "And so you have it, a plan whereby the well-being of all ducks will be guaranteed by all men." The ducks waited for the messenger to continue, but he said only, "Thank you. The volunteers will pass among you and collect your contributions." Then, back on the opposite side of the valley, a thin, mostly inaudible voice could be heard speaking from the cliff. One by one, and then in large...
Without north or south, or a miracle, another clear message comes through. Nothing has changed. Go home. A group of plates represents a homecoming feast where the boy's parents have prepared roast duck. The duck looks familiar, but the boy eats with relish. So remember, if you didn't have a body, your brain would not have a way to go for a walk.
If you didn't have a body, your brain couldn't go for a walk. It couldn't even watch television, smell a fish or call a friend up to talk. If a river didn't have a bank, it wouldn't know the way to the sea. It would spread itself out too thin and evaporate outside St. Louis. So don't worry about your flat feet. They're good enough to give your brain a ride. If the river seems too muddy and slow, it's because it's deep and bounded up on either side. It's because it's deep and bounded up on either side. On either side.
He was to speak at his appointed place on the cliff overhead. At noon, he had not yet come. During a lull in the general noise of the crowd, a thin, mostly inaudible voice could be heard speaking from the cliff on the opposite side of the valley. One by one, and then in larger groups, the ducks began to move toward the voice. Some grumbled as they went along, complaining of the shoddy arrangements and bad acoustics, but they pushed ahead anyway, and were just as anxious as the others to get a place where they could hear what was being said. Down the center of the valley was a shallow river with only one narrow bridge. The ducks, of course, could easily swim the slow river, but they wanted to look civilized to the human messenger. Consequently, they all crowded to the bridge and took nearly 5 hours to approach earshot of the far cliff. As they came together, the speaker concluded, "And so you have it, a plan whereby the well-being of all ducks will be guaranteed by all men." The ducks waited for the messenger to continue, but he said only, "Thank you. The volunteers will pass among you and collect your contributions." Then, back on the opposite side of the valley, a thin, mostly inaudible voice could be heard speaking from the cliff. One by one, and then in larger groups, the ducks began to move.
Without north or south, or a miracle, another clear message comes through. Nothing has changed. Go home. A group of plates represents a homecoming feast where the boy's parents have prepared roast duck. The duck looks familiar, but the boy eats with relish. So remember, if you didn't have a body, your brain would not have a way to go for a walk.
If you didn't have a body, your brain couldn't go for a walk. It couldn't even watch television, smell a fish or call a friend up to talk. If a river didn't have a bank, it wouldn't know the way to the sea. It would spread itself out too thin and evaporate outside St. Louis. So don't worry about your flat feet. They're good enough to give your brain a ride. If the river seems too muddy and slow, it's because it's deep and bounded up on either side. It's because it's deep and bounded up